Today on the agenda. Today on the agenda, we're going to actually do a coding review of the video processor application that I wrote. As I may have mentioned, if I haven't, I will cover it here, but this application is a worker service that is written in C# that automates the videos that you see here on this channel as well as the other YouTube channels that I run. I want to show this because of the fact this is a technological piece that is very unconventional in nature. Also wanted to show you how in ways, this will be one video of several ways that you can build C# applications that are custom to what you need it to do. Now, the most common thing you'll probably hear about C# applications is that you build console applications or you build web-based applications, whether those be APIs or MVC or Blazor apps. However, you can build worker services that do other things in, C#. So let's get started. All right, so I already have the project pulled up, and this is some output from the previous run of the project, so you can kind of ignore that for now. Better yet, we'll just go ahead and close that. If it'll close. There we go. Close. There we go. All right. And so what we have is I did my best to design this in a domain-driven pattern. The original application was just written inside of a single project, but the newer application, I followed Steve Smith's, aka Ardalis, template for clean architecture worker service. You can go on GitHub and find that there if you want to look at that. In his template project, he has 3 projects. He has a domain, infrastructure, and a worker project. And so I've set this project up in a similar manner with domain, infrastructure, and worker. The domain has pretty much the domain entities as well as the related services for those entities. The services would be, in short, the processing of a video file. So you take a file from the incoming directory, you extract the contents, you render those contents out as a video, and then you move the file from the incoming directory to the archive directory, and then you repeat the process until all the files that are in the incoming directory have been processed. And this is how all of the video files work for each of them. So we will go through, since this is the technology channel, I will show you how the technology video service as well as the technology video entity works. All right, so we'll start from the worker service or the worker project. And if we go into the program.cs, you see here we have basically a fairly simple program.cs file. For the record, this is a .NET 6 console worker application. Excuse me, not a console application. It's a worker service application. So we have a app setting singleton defined here because there are some configurations I use for the computer that I build or write the code on. So the computer that I'm using right now is my development environment. And then I have a server that I utilize as my production environment or my release environment where it does and runs 24/7. So anytime I load a video to it, it can process that video at that time. Now what I have is defined is interfaces for each of the video services, and for those that I have other services, so I have some interface or infrastructure services, so those are also defined here in the configure services method. And at the current moment, I'm only using the handyman video worker and the technology video worker. I do have some stuff that I've done with Toastmasters. So I have a Toastmasters worker in here because I do the recordings for our Toastmasters meeting and post them online so that whenever somebody gives a speech, they can go back and watch and look and critique themselves based upon the video that was recorded. So that's why there's a Toastmasters worker here. But the main 2 channels here are the Handyman YouTube channel. So the home improvement channel has its own worker and the technology videos have their own worker. The reason they have their own workers is because of the fact I want to be able to go into the uploads directory and grab everything in that directory and send it straight to YouTube. And if they're intermingled with each other, that makes it very difficult to do. Like I want this process to be very straightforward. The long-term plan is to have where this worker service will actually go, and as it renders the videos, it will go ahead and upload them in addition to getting the keywords and other metadata to include with the video. So that's why they're separated out like they are. Also, each video has a different set of configuration for it. So the technology videos have as you look up here in the upper right, I'm pointing the wrong way, the upper right, you'll see that the branding up there is a green background with white text. On the Handyman channel or Home Improvement channel, it is a black background with yellow text. With Christmas, I believe I have it set with maroon and white, and the dash cam has each one has its own color configuration. Each one has different text that shows up, and like the dash cam video, they have text on both the upper right and the upper left, because the upper right is the branding of the channel, the upper left is that particular video destination, source, and the roads that are taken. So that configuration is depending upon the video, and so I've created a service for each one of those. And I've also injected a logger service. Each of the services, I believe, does have a logger service that it references, and so you can do a generic reference to that. And the way our Dallas did it in one of his videos was to do a type of iLogger service with the empty brackets, and then you do type of and then the actual definition. So this is interface, this is the actual implementation. All right, so from there, this technology worker service has a corresponding worker file. And so in that worker file, fairly straightforward, you load the app settings, which has the worker delay. So basically each time it runs through this loop, there's a delay defined. I believe in the dev environment here, it is defined as 15 seconds, whereas in production or the release mode has it as 120 minutes. All right, so we come to the video service, which has a method called process videos async. And this is, if you're not familiar with worker services in C#, you have a execute async method. And this method ideally repeats an infinite amount of times and doesn't quit until the application is ended. All right, so we have the process videos async, and I'm gonna take you to the interface, and this is the only method within that interface. Now I have a base video service as well as a base video entity, and those two are here. So this base video service has a process videos async method with a cancellation token that is passed in from the worker service. That way, if the application is closed, that cancellation token passes through and will exit out everything that has referenced it. All of the video services reference this class. So if we go to the implementation of this class in the technology video service, we have everything that this will be doing. So we have this all contained within a while loop because we wanted to process all the videos. If there are videos there, we want it to continue running, and only once everything has been cleared out does this application take a break. So we're declaring a new instance of the technology video, and we're applying the app settings technology directory. Depending on the environment, this determines where that comes from. We're creating the video directory, so that'd be the incoming, upload, archive, and working directories. If they already exist, then nothing is done. Then we're deleting files older than the specified amount of days. And the reason this is being done at the beginning, because I've actually created so many videos at times that I've run out of space. So I want to delete those old stuff first and then go into the creation process. Want to check and make sure you actually have space on the hard drive to create videos, because, well, if you can't create videos, then why run this process? And this will throw an exception if there is no space. All right, now sometimes I create these videos from just putting files into a folder and then staging them in the incoming directory in their folder instead of compressing them. What I wanted to do is, if there are directories in the incoming directory, that it takes those and creates a tarball from those directories. And because the rest of this application is set up to handle tarballs being moved back and forth, not directories. So create tarballs for each of the directories, if there are directories there, and then start with a random tarball. And you just get one at random. There's a file system implementation in the infrastructure class, infrastructure project, that gets a random file from the incoming directory. And then we define that in our video class here we delete the working directory and then we recreate it. That way, if something crashed last go around, that we're not starting off with the old stuff. Once those old directories have been deleted, or working directory has been deleted and recreated, then we extract the current tarball contents to said working directory. We prepare all the files in the directory. Basically, what this method currently does is that it lowercases all of the files from camel case or uppercase to lowercase, and then any of the files that are in the, if the tarball has directories inside of it, it moves all of those files in those directories up to the root. And the reason being is because the way the rest of this application is designed to look at one folder, and that is the root. And I don't want it to have to traverse directories and all that kind of other stuff. It makes things a little bit more complex when that is the case. All right, coming back. Now, some of these videos that I create, they have time lapses in them. And what I wanted to do was to be able to have music in those time lapses if I did not do a narration. That being said, we have add music to the video async. And what this does is it utilizes FFmpeg to see if there's audio on each of the video files. If there is no audio portion of each of the video files, then what it does is it goes to the music library that I have saved on the computer and pulls one of the music mixes that I have and merges the video with that music mix so that I have video with music during that time lapse. All right, next we convert all the video files to a common format. In this particular case, that common format is the TS format. And the reason being is because I found with FFmpeg, you can convert MP4 to a different format to make them all match. However, that can cause problems trying to match all of the video files to the same format. In addition to, it takes a lot longer. And the reason being is because, so my phone records in one MP4 format, and I don't have it next to me, but my GoPro records in a different MP4 format. Even though they were both the same file type, which is an MP4, the formatting or the resolution of those things are different. And if you try to put two videos into FFmpeg that have different resolutions of MP4, it doesn't like it. As a matter of fact, it actually has crashed. And so I found out that you can convert those to the TS format, even if they have different MP4 formats, convert them to the TS format and then merge them together, and you don't get that same problem. So once they're converted to the TS format, then I create a FFmpeg input file. Now, if you've never used FFmpeg, the input file basically lists all the files that you want to merge into a single video. And so you give it this text file, which is referred to as the input file. And what it does is it will process and attach the videos in the specified order from that input file. The draw text video filter is basically the text that you see up here in the upper right corner. You defined like the text that needs to be displayed. So we have a channel banner in this particular case, the colors, the size of the font, the positioning of the font, the background border, so whether it's a border or no border, and then how wide that border is, and then also the coloring of that border and the transparency or opacity, depending on who you ask, of that. And then all of that is returned back as a string, which is then used in FFmpeg as the VF argument that is passed to FFmpeg. Then we have the render video async method, which takes the input file, the video filter, the output file, and a cancellation token, aka stopping token in this case, and passes that to what is the process method. So if we do this here and then we call FFmpeg async, there we go. All right. And so we have a run process method. So it takes those arguments in and adds them to the command line. And then we are using the process class in C# to run the application, which basically runs the FFmpeg with all the values in, and that renders that out. After that completes, check the output to make sure that the exit code is not greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, we throw an exception for rendering, and then we print the standard error from FPP out to the console. If all is good, then you exit the task and come back to this method. Once that video is rendered, then move the file from the incoming directory, the tar file that is, to the archive directory, and then we delete the working directory and then repeat the process. Now, if there are no files present, which is thrown from this get random tarball from directory method, then it skips down here and doesn't do any of this, because if there's nothing to process, why are you trying to go through all of these things? And of course, if there's an exception other than this no tarballs exception, then we catch that exception and we log it to the console so it can be done for or looked at for further diagnosis. And this is how pretty much the handyman, as well as the technology services and the video service, Christmas Light video service work for this particular application. Now, looking at the video entity for the technology videos, basically have a base directory, and that base directory is essentially the root, or whatever is defined as the root for where all of the video footage is being stored. And then we have some overrides here for the text color, the background color of the graphics, like you see in the upper right here, as well as the text to display in the upper right. And the way this text works is there's a list of options here that it picks at random. And so each time it runs a video, sometimes it picks the same thing for 2 to 3 videos in a row. That's just a matter of timing. Sometimes it doesn't. I never know. So I put a list of what I wanted to put in there, and that's what it does. If we come back to, let's go to the base video entity. And so you can see the methods in here. And there are a lot of properties on here because most of these are the directories of where things need to be and where to move them to. And I wanted to set this up so that I just call the property to be able to pull those things in where they need to go. And that's it. Don't have to worry about, is the file path right? Did you misspell the file path? Do you have it in every place? Put those file paths in the properties and then call the property, and you won't have to worry about as many mistakes. As I mentioned, I did do this in a domain-driven design pattern, which means that I tried to encapsulate all of the setting and getting within the entity class itself. Starting from the top, we have a abstract class for this base video entity. If I jump over to the technology video entity, as you see, it is a public sealed record, meaning that this cannot be inherited or used by another class in an inheritance type manner. And you want to use that for your entities because of the fact they should not be inherited by other classes. Now, the base video entity is not a sealed class. It is an abstract class, meaning no other, or it cannot be implemented within the application. Basically, you cannot do new base video as a command in the application. It has to be utilized by some other entity within the application, which is what I wanted. All right, the default constructor or the constructor, not necessarily default, the constructor for this takes a base directory, and that comes from the app settings. And the reason being, I did not pull that from app settings directly. I wanted it to be passed in, and so that's what you get here. From this being passed in, you do your verification or basically a null check, and if it is null, throw an exception. Going to continue on, and then you define these properties here. And the reason these are defined here as string.empty is because of the fact in .NET 6, by default, it does not allow null strings. If you have a string that can be null or is null, you have to put a question mark on there. Now, there is a way to disable that setting, but out of good practice, I chose not to try to disable that setting and try to be better about writing my code and making sure that I'm not sending null when I know a null should not ever be sent. That's why these here are defined as string.empty. And then we have all of the properties listed, and majority of them are set as private methods. These here are set as get only because of the fact they are defined in the beginning. And once they are defined, they should never change, and there should not be a setter. And then we have the abstract methods for the channel banner text, the text color, and the box color. Again, that's the graphics up here in the upper right that you see. Then we have the set tarball path. So this is being defined or called once we actually verified that we clean off the disk and then that we have enough space on the disk to create to do videos. And there's a threshold defined in that. That threshold varies depending upon which environment I'm running it in. So we set a number of, we get the tarball path. So basically you find the first file that you want to process. Make sure it's not null or white space. If it is, throw an exception. And then we want to verify that the extension on that tarball file is correct, or the file that it finds is actually a tarball. If it is not, then again, throw an exception. Once we get past all of those verifications, then we come down here to get just the file name, and then we use the file name in the actual title of the video. So the title that you're seeing here may or may not be the original title that I came up with this video, because sometimes I do update the titles after I upload the video and see how much attention or audience or traction that they are getting, and then of course change it as necessary. So we get the title from the tarball file name and set that to various other properties, stripping off the extension and so forth. And then we also set the destination for where that archive should be sent to, or the tarball should be sent to. The output file name is the name of the video file. So ideally you have the name of the tarball file will become part of the MP4 output file that is being created. And last but not least, I've kind of already covered this, but basically getting a random channel banner text to display in the upper right that you see up there. And so that is the base service and the base video entity. We have some constants defined in here, and I still need to reorganize these a little bit better, because actually this should be in the common and not, well, I take it back. No, because it's on specific to video, so FFmpeg, so it's in the right location. But I do have some constants defined up here. As you see, we have formatting and some file names. Really, that probably needs to move to the video entity out of this constants class. We have our directory name, so instead of typing incoming, the word incoming every time, I decided to define a string constant that is that reference. And so when you go to put those in, you're able to get the autocomplete, which means you will less likely make a mistake in your code. Next, we have the file extensions. So all of the various file extensions that are used within this application are defined here as constants. Again, it goes back to making sure that you're reducing the amount of mistakes that you can make by mistyping a string. And then lastly, we have the exception message class, which I only have one reference to, and this is passed when no files are present. I'm actually thinking of taking this out because I think I did take it out on the other classes for no tarball being present. And we have a base entity, which is basically an abstract class that is referenced. I've already kind of covered app settings a little bit. I created separate exception classes for each type of event that can occur. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, why are you using exceptions instead of returning back null and whatnot? Looking at the Ardalis clean architecture pattern and how he did things, in some cases, there were exceptions being thrown pretty regularly. Yes, exceptions can be considered to be expensive, but if you really have an issue with some of the data that's being given, you want to exit immediately. As they say, fail fast. And the reason being is if you get to the first, second, third, fifth step, and then only find out at the fifth step that, oh, we got some bad data, let's exit. Like, no, that's the wrong way to do that. You should check all of that stuff before you even get to step one. Like, there should be a step 0, if you will, or something like that nature, that you verify everything that you have is correct and is valid for what you're about to do within the rest of that particular operation. Now, there are other exception classes here specific to videos, and I have those listed over here. Want to jump into the infrastructure class, the infrastructure project, and show you the exceptions here. So we have some exceptions where not able to save certain items, or if the disk space is slow, throw an exception, because again, you want to fail fast. And so throwing exceptions are that. Do note that each of these exceptions are application specific. So I have a base video processor exception, and all of the other exceptions, such as this one, which is the disk space is slow exception, is based on the video processor exception. Just to show you that is also a abstract class based off of the exception. I believe that's system.exception. Yeah, system.exception class. All right, and then we have the processes service or processes class, where we have various actions that can be taken. So if I need to run FFmpeg or FFprobe, that comes down here to this particular class and is called accordingly. Likewise, tarball because I do extract and create tarballs as part of this application. So it gets its own class in the processes namespace. And last we have logging. And so as you see here, we log in the 4 different types, and we're calling the base logger the Microsoft defined logger. Let's see, Microsoft extensions logging iLogger to do the logging for the application. And this is in the infrastructure because of the fact it is an external dependency. Likewise, the file system and running these processes are an external dependency to the application, and thus they are being handled by the infrastructure project instead of being a part of the domain. That I believe covers everything with this particular application as it currently stands. I do have it some stuff done or set up with cleaning and spell checking the subtitle files. So if you're watching with subtitles or captions, do note that they may have been automated and cleaned up by this particular application, because sometimes you make mistakes when you say things. And yes, I could hire a transcription service to do each of my videos. However, I could also build an application one time and have it handle the transcriptions of my videos and then tweak it as need be. The time spent, in addition to being able to create more content to talk about, is far more valuable in this case of building my own transcription automation than it is to paying someone $1 to $3 per minute of video that needs to be edited. So I will probably cover that a little bit more. It's not finished. The transcription cleanup process, that is not finished at this time, but once it is, that'll probably be a future video. If you're interested in that, please leave a comment and I'll be glad to discuss that a little bit further when that time comes. I will also add to this application runs as a Windows service. Not a Windows service, a Linux service, because I do pretty much my local development on Linux. And so what I did is I created a systemd folder within the project, and we had this video processor worker, and then we had the executable defined for where I loaded onto the production environment, because I don't run this as a worker service in the development environment. There's no need. If I need to run this in development, I pull up this and then hit F5 and run it in debug mode. Next, we also have the test. I have not built out the test all the way as of yet. And so there are some tests in here that basically test some of the methods. So if we throw an exception when there's white space with the base video directory and stuff like this is in here, but I'll probably be writing more tests as time goes on. I just hadn't had the opportunity because I want to really get this working so that I can create more content in a more efficient manner. And I believe that may be it. Yeah, so I have some other additional information about this on the project page. A link to the project will be in the description, where it will take you to my GitHub where this resides. All right. That being said, that wraps things up for this video. If you have comments or questions about C# or anything that you saw in this video, please leave them down below, because the more questions you ask, the more likely I'm creating content based off the questions you're asked. And guess what? Your question could be the feature of the next video on here channel. Also, please be sure to subscribe. New videos all the time. If you're not subscribed, guess what? You miss out. So please subscribe, and also give this video a thumbs up if you're interested in C# comment and C# coding, as well as learning more about automation and just improving things using technology. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.